It's the summer of 2003. A family has just returned to their quiet home in rural upstate New York after a long 4th of July trip to Niagara Falls. Exhausted from a full day of driving, the parents put their kids straight to bed and collapse into a heavy sleep. Around 4 a.m., the mother wakes up in a pitch-black room. Feeling an empty space beside her, she assumes her husband has gotten up to use the restroom and takes the opportunity to steal back the covers. That as she pulls the sheets, she accidentally wakes him. He gasps. In a sudden, violent motion, he rips his feet away from the end of the bed, pulling his knees to his chest so fast he nearly knocks her over. He doesn't say a word. He just curls into a tight fetal position, peering over his arm, staring completely paralyzed at the foot of the bed. The absolute panic in his silence registers instantly. The human brain is wired to fear the dark, but that instinct usually fades once we retreat to the ultimate sanctuary of our own beds. Finding out that sanctuary has been breached while you were unconscious is a completely different kind of terror. As her eyes adjust, the mother finally sees what he's staring at. Sitting at the foot of their bed, facing away from them, is a creature. She would later describe it as resembling a naked man or a large hairless dog, hunched in a disturbing, unnatural posture, as if it had been severely injured. Suddenly, the entity scrambles around the side of the bed. It crawls right up the covers in a frantic, flailing motion until its face is less than a foot away from the husband. It stays there for 30 seconds in complete silence. Then it places a single hand on his knee, turns, and sprints down the hallway directly toward the children's bedrooms. The mother screams and lunges for the light switch. By the time the hall is illuminated, she spots the creature 20 feet away, crouched and looking back at her, covered in blood. Inside the room, her daughter Clara is critically injured. Before losing consciousness, the young girl speaks her final words. He is the Rake. In a desperate panic, the husband scoops up his daughter and rushes to the car to get her to a hospital. But speeding blindly through the dark rural roads, the car veers off course and crashes into a nearby lake. Neither of them survive. In a small town, news of a double tragedy travels fast. At first, local police are helpful, and newspapers show immense interest. But quickly, an unexplained blackout takes effect. The story is never published. Television news crews drop the case completely. The mother is left entirely alone with her grief, her surviving son, and a single cryptic name. Losing your family in a single night is a devastating tragedy. But when the institutions designed to protect the public and document the truth enforce a total wall of silence, that tragedy curdles into a waking nightmare. You realize you are entirely on your own. Refusing to let the silence stand, the mother begins her own investigation. Over 2 grueling years, she hunts across early internet forums and writes hundreds of letters, eventually connecting with a handful of other witnesses scattered from New York to Idaho. Together, they begin assembling a hidden archive of historical encounters. They discover this entity has been hunting for centuries. The oldest piece of evidence they uncover is a weathered mariner's log dating all the way back to 1691. It documents an encounter that demonstrates not only the creature's extreme age, but its demanding nature. The captain writes of being visited in his sleep, feeling a bizarre sensation from the foot of his bed. His entry concludes with a desperate command: "We must return to England. We shall not come here again at the request of the Rake." It acts with authority, making explicit demands of its victims. Nearly 200 years later, an 1880 journal translated from Spanish details an almost identical intrusion. The writer fixates on the physical horror of the entity, repeating their dread over and over, before noting 2 terrifying details: its piercing, hollow black eyes, and the horrific touch of its wet hand. The journal captures rapid mental unraveling. The victim is consumed by panic, driven to the absolute breaking point. They end their entry by declaring a complete refusal to ever go to sleep again, terrified of what waits for them in the dark. Across centuries and continents, the accounts describe a single, consistent pattern of behavior. The entity bypasses typical predatory instincts to focus entirely on humans in their most vulnerable state, methodically dismantling the sanctuary of sleep through a campaign of persistent nocturnal stalking. The archive reveals an even darker layer to the entity's methodology. A suicide note discovered from 1964 shows how the horror shifts from the threat of physical violence to inescapable psychological destruction.
In the note, the author apologizes for the pain they are about to cause, but places the blame squarely on the creature. They describe waking up time and time again, first to its presence, then its form, then its voice. The torment became so unbearable that they took their own life simply to escape the cycle, writing, "I cannot sleep with fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake." Found in the same wooden box was a loose, handwritten letter to a loved one that adds a deeply insidious detail. It reads, "Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name." Looking at these accounts side by side, a clear behavioral pattern emerges. The rake rarely strikes just once. It visits a single target repeatedly over a period of weeks or months, slowly escalating its presence. It systematically dismantles their sanity, guaranteeing psychological ruin long before it ever initiates a physical attack. The sheer physical violence of the 2003 attack serves as the final, brutal punctuation to a much longer process. Before the blood in the hallway, there is the voice, the repeated visitations, and the slow erosion of the victim's sanity. The entity effectively turns its target's own mind into a prison long before it ever strikes. Armed with this timeline of escalating visits, the surviving mother from the 2003 attack is struck by a terrifying realization. If this entity always stalks its victims over time, it's highly probable it had been inside her home, standing over her family, long before that fatal 4th of July. She becomes obsessed with finding out if it's still there. She sets up a digital audio recorder next to her bed, leaving it running all night, every single night. Every morning, she tediously scans through 8 hours of her own sleep sounds, listening for anything out of the ordinary. For 2 weeks, there is nothing but the quiet rustle of blankets. But on the first day of the 3rd week, the playback captures something entirely different. Cutting through the silence is a distinct, unnatural, shrill voice. She refuses to let anyone else hear the tape, but the moment she listens to it, she recognizes the sound. She realizes with absolute sickening clarity that this exact voice is what her husband was listening to during his 30 seconds of paralyzed silence at the foot of their bed. Today, she remains physically unharmed, but she lives every single day with the absolute certainty that she is not alone. She knows the creature has returned to her room, and she fears the night she will finally wake up to find it staring back at her. We lock our doors to keep out the things we can see, but the enduring horror of the rake relies on the fact that true vulnerability doesn't happen when we are awake and alert. The ultimate terror is the lingering, dreadful knowledge that you never truly know what is standing in the dark, watching you breathe until you open your eyes.